So thank you, Tushar, for the great introduction. And it's always tricky to follow Mahesh because he's such a great speaker and has such a great vision of the big picture of where things are going in the industry and where Cleo's going. So hopefully we can still bring some excitement and some energy. I know Vidya's always going to bring that, and John too. So let's get started with our session. As Tushar mentioned, we're going to talk about Integration 2020 and specifically about how agility drives change and really how that affects Cleo as an organization and our customers. So let's start with introductions in case you haven't met the panel before. My name is Dave Brunswick. I'm the Vice President of Solutions for Cleo. I've been with Cleo about 6 years and in the integration space quite a bit longer than that. My role in Cleo is to work with our customers and our sales team, as well as John and Vidya's teams and the rest of the organization, to make sure that the solutions we have solve the problems that our customers are trying to solve in that ecosystem integration space. So that's me. Maybe I'll pass to Vidya next, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. My name is Vidya Chidaga. I'm the Vice President of Products here at Cleo. I call myself the product gal on Slack. So my role here is to take the product from inception all the way to launch. And so today, in a way, it's a big day for my team and the rest of the product organization, where we were able to announce and bring accelerators to market. This is something that's been cooking here at Cleo at a concept level for a while, and now we were able to productize it and bring it to market. Hopefully, a lot of you will be able to take advantage of it. I run product management, product marketing, and product strategy here at Cleo, and work very closely with John Thielens and Dave Brunswick and Jorge Rodriguez on the product side. So excited to be here and have this conversation with the two of you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vidya. And John, perhaps you can introduce yourself too.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. My name's John Thielens. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Cleo. I've been here just about coming up on 8 years. I keep an eye on trends in technology and in security, and work closely with our architecture team to kind of keep the technology side of our roadmap so that we can take the ideas that Vidya comes up with and bring them to life, but in a way that's operationally sound and technically secure. So I work closely with Dave's team. I engage a lot with some of our customers' architects when it comes time to sort of negotiate those boundaries between what we do and what you do. Yeah, I'm excited to participate in this conversation today.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. So maybe just one thing to say before we kick off. We will try and monitor the Q&A panel. So if you have any questions or observations you'd like us to comment on, then please do jump in, raise a question. We'll try and get to it if we can, given the time available. We've got about 45 minutes, so we should have some time to answer some questions as we go through. So I'm going to kick off. I wanted to kind of just pull back on a couple of remarks that Mahesh had. He talked about the importance of agility and how you can use agility to become the Zoom of your industry, and that kind of resonated with me. I think we can look at what we're trying to do with ecosystem integration, and the agility of Cleo as an organization is become the Zoom of ecosystem integration, or the Kleenex of ecosystem integration, right? So when you think about agility, when you think about ecosystem integration, then you think of Cleo. And agility within our own organization and the ability to respond to agility from our customers is really what this session is all about. So Mahesh talked about some of the market disruptions, and from my perspective and talking to our customers, I think there's two that we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months that have really driven some substantial change in thinking around the need to be agile. And the first one Mahesh touched on was this massive acceleration of e-commerce and the drive from bricks and mortar stores towards much more online retail marketplaces and such place and so on. And while that's been happening for a while, that's rapidly accelerated over the last 12 to 18 months. And how that's affected our customers is they now have to be, particularly on the manufacturing and distribution side, have to be very, very mindful of what the current dynamics are in terms of buying patterns. So, are people buying from Amazon? Are we seeing an uptick in Walmart.com? Where are people going to buy now? They're not going to the stores to buy goods, and that's driving this need to really be mindful of what's happening in the industry and be able to respond quickly and say, okay, well, I was just selling in bulk distribution through EDI to traditional retail, but now I need to get my goods into Amazon. I need to be on Walmart.com. How am I going to do that? What do I need from a technology perspective to enable that change and to enable me to be agile as those patterns change going forward? The second thing that's really been driving the disruption or disrupting the market and driving the need for agility is the ongoing supply chain disruptions that we've been seeing. And whether that's from just consumer demand and panic buying of toilet paper or shortage of chips due to distribution issues. We've seen all sorts of these spot effects happening, like timber prices spiking, chip shortages, paint shortages, shipping costs going through the roof. And when you look at the kind of other side of the supply chain, the fulfillment and delivery side of that, it's kind of driven some real dynamic changes in a constantly shifting environment, such that retailers like Costco and Walmart have been renting their own ships to allow them to be reactive to distribution challenges as it goes on. And we've also seen on our distribution and transportation customers, that suddenly there's a massive demand supply imbalance. And so to take advantage of that and get the most profitable use of the limited resources they have has meant a real need to be dynamic and agile in what they do. So if I was to kind of sum that up in a couple of key phrases, I think people have been talking about the new normal, but I don't think it's really about the new normal. It's about how are things going to keep evolving, right? So we've seen this massive increase in change over the last 12 to 18 months, and I think that's going to carry on. So the new normal is going to become the new agile, right? To be effective in the current world of business, you have to have that level of agility that Mahesh was talking about. And in order to be agile, you've got to make the right decisions around technology and company agility, people and teams within organizations, in order to keep up with the pace of what the new normal is going to be. So with that kind of background and a few observations on where we've seen our customers having to react, perhaps Vidya, you can talk about your philosophy around agility and from the product perspective, and how we can help our customers by Cleo being agile on the product side.
Absolutely. I think from a product philosophy perspective, I think it starts with the voice triangle. That's our North Star. And what I mean by the voice triangle is we are always thinking about the voice of the customer, the voice of the market, and voice of Cleo. While these might seem like buzzwords, they are the reality of our being here at Cleo, right? We obviously all the time, we are thinking about our customers, we're talking to them, understanding the requirements and their use cases. We truly are big on use cases here at Cleo, and we want to make sure that we have the flexibility to be able to pick and choose where the market is going and how we can be there when the market gets there. So the voice of the customer, we've got, and we'll talk more about it, Dave, as we go through this panel. Mm-hmm. the stuff that we do with respect to getting more from our customers on the voice of the customer. And the voice of the market is also very important to us. And what I mean by the voice of the market is we keep a pulse on what analysts are saying, what subject matter experts are saying, where competition is going. We keep an eye on just the trends that are impacting supply chain, because that's the industry we are focused on. Where it's maybe pivoting a little bit, even the 1 degree left or 1 degree right. What does that mean to Cleo from a product perspective? And the third is the voice of Cleo. As we know, we've got, I want to say, collectively thousands of years of experience across all of the subject matter experts we have within Cleo. We've got Cleo priorities, we've got our vision, our goal, corporate goals. So we have to keep the voice of Cleo in we have to take that into account as well. I feel like the voice triangle is one part of it. And the second is flexibility. Flexibility to me is when you have a problem to solve and you have to pick and choose from the numerous ideas that come our way, either because of the voice triangle or just organically because of the priorities we have within the company. How do you pick and choose, and how are you flexible enough to change based on what you're hearing from customers and the market? And so I think that's a big part of it. And the third, which I think is a direct answer to your question, Dave, on agility, is our eye on velocity. We want to fail fast. We want to experiment fast. We want to be able to say no to things quickly, but not without good reason. So we have a methodology where we have a core set of team members, right from product management, engineering, user experience, where we go, we do a little bit of these spikes, and we do we have these runways where we figure out, is this something that we want to do? And we want to be nimble and fast to change if we need to. And I think velocity is key. We are constantly thinking about new ways to evolve and change velocity so that we're able to bring smaller chunks of the product, solve for simple use cases quickly and bring those to the market so that our customers don't have to wait for a long time to get what they're looking for or asking for.
That's great. Thank you, Vidya. Yeah, no, that's a great insight into the broad picture of how we think about what we're going to do from a product perspective. And then, John, maybe you can talk a little bit about how we go about thinking about how we're going to do it, and the architecture and philosophy around agility from that perspective.
Yeah, sure. There's certainly a lot to talk about in terms of technology and agility. There's been a buzzword, agility, a long time on the architecture side. One thing that I think is true of technology investments, whether you're a product-oriented company as we are, or whether your product is something else and you use information technology to move your business along, the capacity of an IT organization to consume resources is infinite. We never run out of ideas of things that we might do. So we need to be very careful to do things at the last responsible minute in support of where we're trying to go as a business, or in support of the market landscape or the security landscape. So what does agility mean then? Well, I think it means breaking down your ideas into consumable pieces that then you can deploy, kind of piecemeal in small bits, and then do some experimentation. Vidya talked about failing fast. We do research, we do studies, we try things, we can pull them back. And by not having made giant investments, the grand reveal, it reminds me, architecture in software, we use a lot of terminology that comes from actual physical architecture constructing buildings. I don't know if you know the story of the Chrysler building in New York when they built that back in the 30s, but that's got that beautiful spire, and they built it in secret. Inside the tower, because they were competing with the Empire State Building down the street. And then one night they hauled it up and this giant crown appeared as a grand architectural reveal. That's a great story for building architecture, but that's not how we can do things here. There's no time to prepare in secret. So we try to continually evolve and do experiments, and when things don't work, we can quickly pull them back. So the philosophy of architecture can't be architecture first. It has to be business first, outcome first. And that's where the sort of voice landscape that Vidya talked about is so important. So, and we work very closely together. However, there's some meta architecture that we need to put in place. And I think this is what leads to, Mahesh talked about EDI and API, sort of woven together. It's that API sort of orientation. API is not only sort of a requirement of how we need to integrate with our trading partners these days, but it's also kind of an element of architecture, how we build things. And so I think this is reflective of a shift, what I'll call a services orientation, where we try to think about what we're building as a collection of services. So then there's more encapsulation, there's more ability to build small things and weave them in. And that applies at kind of a micro level. Some people adopt microservices as a kind of religion. I'll leave that one alone for the moment. But even if you look at your whole business, your business is kind of a service, and you're discovering that you can, isolate pieces. Your whole ERP, it's not a hunk of software running on a server. Now it's a service. It's a SaaS. Your ecosystem integration platform. Traditionally, you might have used Cleo as an on-premise, operational capability. You combined people and the hardware and our software to make a service. Now you can just get the service. And use that as a separate piece. So this idea of service orientation and service composition, I think, is part of the sort of meta architecture that you need to put in place so that you have the kind of ability to do technical experiments or technical innovations in a way that doesn't involve this grand reveal where, if your tower came out pointed sideways, that's a big problem. You can't afford to fix that. So we have to do little bits and keep it, because the landscape's changing, keep it pointed in the right direction. So I think that's why APIs are so interesting, is because APIs lead to services, which leads to encapsulation and agility.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of parallel there, John, between some of the things we're seeing in, particularly in the manufacturing and management of brands, where we're now seeing companies that are really taking a service-oriented approach to how they structure their business and then building their integration infrastructure around that. So we've talked to a number of organizations over the last 6 months, I guess, where they're looking at plugging in new businesses into their overall operating infrastructure. And then in terms of, a new brand or a new product piece by merger and acquisition, and designing their ecosystem in that kind of service-oriented way from a business perspective, so they can plug in a new brand, fire up the integrations they need, the e-commerce, the back-end ERPs, and then integrate those together in the same kind of way that you talk about the architecture. And I guess, Vidya, in terms of the way we're thinking about accelerators and how we can work through and plug those into the ecosystem integration story, that's kind of a similar idea, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, you spoke about brands expanding, companies expanding, bringing in new brands. There's companies coming together. There's mergers, acquisitions. When we talk to customers, it was an eye-opening conversation I had with one of the CIOs just very recently, where he said, we have multiple systems of record. And I was like, oh, so you have multiple brands? And he's like, no, we are one company. We have multiple systems of record because over a period of time, we've acquired about 7 brands, and their growth strategy is 90% through acquisition and 10% organically. And this is a $2 billion plus, a transportation company. And so they said, we've got TMS, WMS, and ERPs in the back end. And when I have to go and set up storefronts and quickly connect to this Amazon store with this backend system and that Shopify platform with this backend system and so on, it gets complicated so quickly. Of course, we can use the CIC to do any-to-any transformation and connectivity. But if you're able to take the complexity out for me, and hopefully customers listening understand that we've just launched accelerators. We didn't want to sit on it. Our list of ERPs on the left-hand side and our list of e-commerce and marketplaces on the right-hand side, systems of record on the left-hand side, and e-commerce and marketplaces on the right-hand side. That map will continue to explode and evolve, and we are quickly adding items. John Thielens has designed an amazing architectural framework where we can quickly start working on backend systems and connect it to the both to the X12 load tender to invoice, order to cash processes, as well as applications and on the right hand side. So I think that's exploding as well. You're right, Dave. This is something that accelerators is I feel like it's the perfect time to have gotten this to market, because customers are saying, I know you can connect. There are many solutions out there that can connect to applications. But if you can do it for my B2B scenario, and you're able to do it fast, my time to market, if a company is going to take about 6 months to connect, and you can do that in like half the time, 1/4 the time, whatever it is, that's faster time to revenue for me, right? I don't have to wait for that particular channel to fire up and get me revenue. It's going to get delayed. Now I can do multiple things quickly. I think that's the second value add. And then third, they're saying, you know what, don't just connect applications. After you've connected, tell me what's happening with it. Give me alerts, give me notifications, show it to me in a dashboard. And, surely we have a slew of customers. I hear from our customers very often. We've got a spectrum of them, right? Folks that are excited that things light up in the cockpit in microseconds, and some others saying, well, I have to wait minutes before things come up. So again, as a part of agility conversation, and just to be very honest and transparent here, because you've got both the head of products and head of technology on the call, we're working on it, right? We want to be able to get you things in seconds and microseconds, and we do system testing, and we do a lot of internal platform level activities to be able to get that information to you really quickly. So it's not just a buzzword, as John and Dave spoke about, but agility is truly the fabric of our being. So John, do you have anything else to add with respect to, just the platform and agility and things firing up in the blink of an eye?
Well, I think you said some things that can be issues, right? So one thing that, if we go back to our building analogy, right? Right next to architecture is art. And we use words when we're talking about software, words like elegance and beauty. And in some cases, elegance and beauty and art are the enemy of agility, or perhaps the reverse. Agility is the enemy of elegance, because you do need to be pragmatic, right? And especially if you're growing through acquisition and you've got multiple systems of record, you're trying to tie them all together, and you got to get the information flowing. Okay, that maybe at first glance that doesn't appear elegant or beautiful, but one of the perspectives we have at Cleo is that, the visibility layer in some sense is at least as important, if not more important, than the actual functional integration layer. So yeah, we need to get these things flowing, and they all have their little quirks, and there's legacy bits that need to come into play. And yeah, over time, we may be evolving those things to bring them together into a centralized platform, but maybe that's not ever really completely worth doing. But as long as I can manage that as if it's a consistent, consolidated place, if I can create an operational surface that not so much masks, but encompasses everything that's happening underneath, and it doesn't sort of matter so much whether I've got it so beautiful and elegant on the inside, because as soon as I get that all polished up, then is it really? I make 2 more acquisitions. Does that make it a big mess again? Have I really gained anything? So sure, there's technical debt, there's architecture, there's things you must clean up, but you don't have to get it perfect in order to achieve a valuable outcome for the business. But think about the operational idea. What is it going to take to actually operate this thing? What data do you need to extract? Can you feed it into a business intelligence or some kind of big data machine learning platform? Where are you really going? Where's the innovation going to happen? Probably not by cleaning up the stuff at the bottom, but by consolidating the information surface and the operational surface into something that you can use to drive the business. I think we need to be, again, careful when we're talking about agility and architecture in the same breath. The architecture enables agility, but then agility creates chaos. Then we have to manage with architecture maybe in a different way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's parallels with the world of, how did you implement an ERP in the old days, right? You'd bring in your busloads of SAP consultants, and you'd spend 3 to 5 years, orchestrating the whole of your business with a highly customized ERP. And particularly in today's world where there's mergers and acquisitions and changes of business and pivoting of strategy happens all the time, that's no longer a feasible option, right? So you've got to take a much more agile and pragmatic view and say, well, the ERP does this, and there are other best of breed systems and services, to your point, John, not necessarily just software, but complete services that become a part of my business that I need to integrate with the ERP. And as things change, I need to be able to wire these new things together much more rapidly. And maybe, sacrifice a little bit of architectural elegance in the overall picture, but as long as we can tie it together in a coherent way that gives us that operational agility as well as ability to plug in new systems, then that gets us much faster to the business outcomes we want. Mm-hmm. So that kind of sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think both of you talked a little bit about experimentation and kind of biting things off in chunks and failing fast and learning as fast as possible. And there's kind of a parallel in the way that we're seeing some of the implementation projects go with Cleo as well, which is just as we described, I just described on the SAP type scenario, our integration projects are starting to split up into smaller chunks so that we can get to business value much faster by biting off a smaller chunk, get to business value with, say, an integration with Amazon or an integration with a couple of trading partners, and then build from that and also learn from that so that we can rapidly then build out the other integrations with the knowledge of what we've done the first time around. And get to, as I say, get to business value faster, but also be more iterative in the way that we treat those rollouts to really make sure we're making those micro adjustments, as you put it, to get us to the right place. So maybe we could talk a little bit more, Vidya, about how you do that kind of experimentation, validation cycle on the product side, and then John, maybe you could talk about on the technology side.
Mm-hmm. Sure. It's honestly, Dave, it's a loaded question. I think it starts with the fact that at Cleo we are blessed on the product side that we have the freedom and the flexibility to experiment. So that's important, right? We were able, from a company perspective, from our leadership perspective, we have that virtue there, which is great. I think when it comes to experimentation, for me, it's about being able to maybe do something and quickly unwind and say, okay, we experimented, we did something. After we did this swag, after we did a little bit of this runway, we realized it's going to take us, we bit more than we could chew. And by the time the customer could get what we were planning to do, it's just so big and so massive that it doesn't make sense. Like maybe the market would pass the customer by, thereby making this trusted partner in Cleo not that relevant. So we have to be very careful in that. And so experimentation for me is one, being able to unwind some of the smaller investments. And the flip side of the small investment is do things in phases. My team is a big fan of phased development. Any big idea you see on the team, you will see the first question either I ask or the other leaders ask us. The first question is, what are the phases? Right? How long? And a phase typically for me is if you can release something in a quarter. And as you know, right now, Cleo has a monthly release cycle. So we don't disrupt your business and so on and so forth. So we release the third Saturday of every month. And so when we do that, we think about, okay, can we chunk it up? Can we give it to Dave Brunswick so he can show it to our customers? Can we give it to your team? If we ask you to wait for 6 months because we are going to release the crescendo, then really you would be like, maybe yes, maybe no. Instead, if we can give you chunks of it and be able to paint the vision of where we are going, then customers can consume that really easily. For me, that's also experimentation. A part of experimentation is that. And lastly, experimentation is about being able to build something today for tomorrow. which means, of course, no one has the crystal ball. We don't know about tomorrow. So how can you pivot? How can you change the same 1 degree turn left or right? If you're able to make that and make those decisions, I think that's also a big part of experimentation for us on the product side.
Yeah, and certainly getting those kind of early views as to, and one of the things that we do inside Cleo is we have a bi-weekly demonstration, if you like, of what the engineers are working on for the next phase of product. And it's fantastic. All of our team attend that. We get to see the work in progress. We get to see the sausage being made. And then we can apply some of those, questions that we might have really early in the phase. So if we need to make any micro adjustments, it can happen without big disruption.
Absolutely.
One thing you mentioned,
and just to extend on what you just said, Dave, we have our customers listening. So I'm going to take the opportunity for a little plug here, which is we are always looking to talk to our customers in those phased approaches, right? So let's say we do a small phase on alerts and notifications, right? And we pull out a couple of alerts in the first phase and in a few alerts in the first phase, and then you come back and you're able to have this conversation with us, again, the voice of the customer. So the plug is reach out to us at products@clio.com with an S, and it comes straight to me and my team, and we would get in touch with you, and we would just hop on a 30 minutes call with you, and you can say, listen, I have been with Cleo for 10 years, 10 months, 10 days, and I see that your CIC studio has these amazing bits of information. Can you surface that to me when this trigger happens? And we can absolutely consider that. So please get in touch with us, products@clio.com.
Yeah, thanks, Vidya. And that kind of experimentation exactly enables that feedback loop. And we're always happy to hear from customers about what they're seeing, new functionality, where it's really hitting the mark and where maybe we can improve that. So
yeah, that part's really critical. One of the challenges we have is, developers, and maybe it's a little like, physicians, when I was a kid, the doctor was the doctor. Now they get, left pinky doctors. Everybody's very specialized on one particular area. The same thing happens in technology. You get very invested in some detail and you forget, or it's easy to get disconnected from the customer and the use case. So we try to close that loop, and that's part of what these phased releases help us do, because the product managers talk to customers, the market, whatever, come up with an idea, we put it on paper, we start building, we run it by Dave and his team, and so we try to target in on what we need, then we release it, and then sometimes customers, it plants a seed and they go off in a different direction with what we started. And we need to know that because we want to follow you. You are our market. And so if we've come close or it's planted a seed of an idea, close the loop. Don't suffer in silence. Don't be quiet about it. We're very much in partnership with the customer base to make sure that we build the right things in the right way, including getting that information back to our developers, and because we're training them to ask the right questions. We're going to do notifications. Will there be 10 or will there be 10,000? Because then that changes the element of the design, right? So they're always asking how many, how much, so that we can get all the invisible guts of things to operate properly at scale. You can think just about a UI. Can you pick from a list? You need to search. If there are 10, I'll pick. If there are 1,000, I need to search. Right? The simple things. And sometimes it's depends who you are. But I don't know if a great example is our reference tables, right, which is a relatively new feature, and we've been evolving that based on feedback. Is it the system of record? Is it copied off of another system? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes, depending on who we're talking to. And so then we evolve what we've built so that it services your needs. So yeah, don't be quiet. Talk to us. We want to hear. Yeah,
definitely. So just a couple of kind of terms that we've used in conversation. Certainly, Vidya, you mentioned runways a couple of times. I know, John, when we've talked, you talked about traceability. So maybe you can explain a runway a little bit, Vidya, and then John, you can talk about what these traceabilities are from a technology perspective.
It's a trick question. Let's see if we have the same definitions even between us. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm going to let John answer that question. Well, I'll take a stab at it. For me, a runway is you take the three elements, what's the use case, what's the kind of the UI, the user experience, and architecture. You take these three elements into consideration and quickly go and figure out how long will it take to develop something, like a proof of concept, right, of sorts. And my expectation is it shouldn't take more than 2 weeks. And wink, wink. Most recently, we had a runway which took about 3 months, which was like, whew, okay, if a runway is taking 3 months, then maybe the actual product will take, I don't know how long. So then that's when John and I go back to the drawing board and say, okay, maybe we need to chop this a little more. We need to chop this up a little more. Or is this, after this entire meal is put together, are hundreds of customers going to use it, or is it for 10 customers, right? Is it like a 1:10 or a 1:100? Because we want, if you're spending that much time and effort, it needs to be at a more mass level than very specific use cases. So John, what do you think?
Well, so I might have a slightly different interpretation.
Go for it.
But so here's how it works, right? Our engineering teams, we work on these 2-week sprint cycles. At the beginning of every 2 weeks, they take the next most important things to do off the list, and they sort of break them down. They estimate, and they make a 80-90%, as accurate as they can prediction about, yes, I'm going to be able to finish that in 2 weeks, and here's how it's going to be, and boom, then we're done. Sometimes they're like, yeah, we don't know, it might be this way, might be this way, you have to try something out. And they'll do something we'll call a spike, which is something that's just time bounded, that will then help them, make the proper estimate. Those are small, it takes a little bit of time. A runway for me is when we really don't know how. We don't know how we're going to do it. Is it this kind of a database or that kind of a database or this kind of a service, or we need to pick a new infrastructure service to support it. And so it's a little bit more like, how are we going to solve that problem? And the amount of time it takes to figure that out, I don't think it necessarily relates to the amount of time it takes to build. If it takes us 3 months to figure it out, that may be so that we can build it in 2 weeks, you see. So it's really the last thing you want to do is hand an engineer, or maybe Dave, in your case, engage with a customer with a blank sheet of paper. What do you want to draw? And they'll draw anything, and it'll take forever. So no, we don't want to do that. We want to hand them very specific, guidance. We still want the engineers who are closest to the problem to make most of the detailed decisions, because they know better than anybody sitting on the outside. But we want to constrain the problem because we've solved it. If we get to like, gee, how are we going to do that? Then we may go off and do a runway. Yeah, it's all about managing the uncertainty. And sometimes we just need to know what to pick, and then we may discover, well, maybe this runway is going to take forever, so let's just pick something and try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll pull it back. Right? That you may actually have to run it all the way to the ground. But again, we're trying to minimize the amount of wasted energy, both on that front end. So if a runway is taking 3 months, that's probably too long. We haven't constrained the definition enough before we hand it off to the team. Versus we start at the beginning, says this should be finished in 2 weeks. So, oh, actually it's 2 months. Or like, well, we would have made a different decision then. You'd have to tell us up front. So it's all about managing that. And look, I'm speaking as as a product company architect, how we're going to figure out how to build stuff. But I think it applies at the macro level as well. If you're one of our customers thinking about how are we going to do this? How are we going to handle adding an e-commerce platform, but now we have to do parcel delivery. We can't put pallets on trucks. And so what are we going to do? How are we going to see that? What do we need to integrate? And maybe the same sort of thing. Well, how can we try? How can we build an experiment? How can we build an inexpensive experiment where we can pull back? So I think those same ideas apply. Whether you use that vocabulary, runways, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to do it. I think really it's more than we don't know what to do. We don't know how. A spike, which is, we can't predict accurately. We know what to do. We just can't predict how long it'll take. Versus the normal run of business, which it's totally well defined. Boom, define, execute, finish, ship. Right, which is where we want to get to. Yeah,
and maybe we should have set up front a little more. So if you want to make the distinction between what video does and what John and the product and the development team do, video is all about what are we going to do, how's it going to benefit our customers, and why. And then John's about how are we going to do it, and how do we get there in the most efficient way. And maybe we can jump off that into a couple of questions that we had in the chat. So there was a question from Rajesh about how do we balance this kind of urgency, effort, value, risk, speed of change in when we think about B2B with Cleo? You know, how do we go about balancing that equation to say, you know, how fast do we want to move, how much risk we want to take, how much value is it going to bring?
Mm-hmm. And it's a great question, Rajesh. It's like, it's the bane of my being, right? It's the biggest challenge that's, if anything keeps me up at night, it's that I'm making the right decision for the business.
I was going to say, that's exactly a great video question.
Which...
F video, yeah.
Exactly. And so I think with respect to the next session we have in 7 minutes is on the roadmap, and I plan to cover a little bit of this just to talk about how are we prioritizing what we are prioritizing. But I think you've nailed all the key elements, right? I think about it as effort and impact, right? Basically, impact and effort. It's, if you were to think about that matrix and very simply say, okay, the impact is huge, the effort is less, then it's a no-brainer, right? It just depends on you know, who's available and who's front-end developer, back-end developer, which component, which, all of that, we just put it into the machine and it comes out. I think the issue is when it's a boulder, when it's big, it's massive, but it's urgent. And that's when we have to start chopping it up and say, okay, and I think, John, you alluded to that a little bit where you said, there was, you know, the scope was not properly defined maybe. So there's a lot of scope creep that happens because as you talk, the voice of the customer, voice of the market starts influencing what we're doing. And we're like, if we can expand that a little more, if they can take this route and do a little more on the UI, that's just going to change everything. And we get so excited with that. And we start talking about those things and defining that in the product and putting it into the requirements. That's too bad, right? Because the effort goes up. It's so big that it's going to take months before we can do that. Risk is another really big element that we have to consider. One thing we do on the product side is we do what is known as a pre-mortem analysis. And it's something that Amazon uses extensively. And pre-mortem, not post-mortem. Pre-mortem is when we take big ideas and we assume everything's going to fail. Customers are not going to be, not just like it, because you know we do validation with our customers. We know they will like it, and that's why it's being put on the block in the first place. But having said that, once you start thinking about what could go wrong from a go-to-market perspective, from a technology perspective, and from an execution perspective, that's when we realize, okay, these are all the potential risks, and we just surface all the risks and we start putting, you know, weightage on those risks, and we say, can we solve it? You know, we have this unknowns and knowns, right? Known knowns, unknown unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. If there are too many unknown unknowns, obviously you can't list them because you don't know it, but then you have a spiky sense of what could go wrong. And then that's how we figure it out. It's a loaded question, Rajesh, but a good one.
Great, thanks, Vidya. I don't know if we're going to cover this in the roadmap session. So if we are, then we can take it there. But there was a question about support for API providers in the platform and what are we doing on that?
And I think, John, this is more on, I would love for you to take it just from a Clarify perspective. I mean, we have API provider right now, right? But I think, I'm not sure if the question is more on-premise or it's for CIC cloud. We'll just have to assume one.
Well, of course, there's a relationship. Clarify typically would be, that's the word we use for on-premise, right? But there is a web service provider construct in Clarify as well as in CIC. And so it's possible today, and with people who are exposing APIs, we're currently doing some work to add that in the cloud, where in the cloud we also have to provide kind of the gateway security front end. If you're operating Clarify on premise, that sort of inbound proxy bit is probably something you need to add to the architecture. But functionally, that passes through then to Clarify, where then that activates a web service provider infrastructure. As I said, we're doing some work to get all this buttoned up in the cloud over the next couple of months, so it's really close. As part of that, we'll be making some extensions, some helper utilities, helper tasks into Clarify. which will give you some like recipe books and methodologies on how you should do it to design an API, the right way in Clarify. But the tools are there now, and maybe you can just reach out to us, and we'd be happy to sort of give you some recipe books or samples.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John. So not to take any time from Video's roadmap, which is coming up, and we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes left. One more question from Ian. Well, actually, more of a comment. It sounds like agility is achieved through an agile approach to your development, but and I think the answer to that is a simple yes. We do take an agile approach. We use an extended kind of agile methodology called SAFe, which John will tell me what that stands for now, because I always forget.
It's scaled agile for enterprises, right?
Right. And that kind of takes the individual agile and brings in the dependencies of teams on others and really puts a framework around that for a company the size of Cleo. Yeah. So any final thoughts or remarks on agility, where we're going to go in 2022? Looks into your crystal balls in the next minute or so that we have left. Vidya, any final thoughts?
I think we are excited. You'll see all the themes we're working on in about 30 seconds. So I wouldn't spill the beans yet. But John, this is your time, buddy. Why don't you say a few words, and then I'll take it to my next session.
Okay, so Vidya gets to take credit for the sort of what we've built. As you said, my job is really more how we build it. But I think I'll fall back on what I said earlier. The most important thing that we can get from a meeting like this, although I wish it were in person, is hearing from you guys. Because the more we know about how you use the product, what direction you want to go in terms of using the product, that helps us not only figure out on Vidya's side what to build, but on the architecture side, how to build it. And are there things we need to figure out? Are there new kinds of integration that you need to do? Are there new types of applications that you need to connect to? New infrastructures, new places you want to run it? Then those are things that, if there's anything we need to figure out, then let us know, and we're happy to figure that out.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you, John. Yeah, thanks, Vidya and John. Great conversation, great discussion. Hopefully the audience got a lot out of it. And let's hand over to Vidya now, who's going to take us through half an hour of roadmap.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.